All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the, Central Minnesota Creation Science Association talk on dinosaur nerves. And Mark Armitage has been doing some really good work. He's been published in secular journals and creation journals, and he's had some of the world's first finds of bone cells and nerves, and it just makes the evolutionists just want to, they can't explain it. And so what we're going to be doing tonight is taking a look at, what he's found. But before we do that, we're going to give you an update on what's been happening in this creation battle. Take a look at a current event that has the scientists, evolutionists pulling their hair out. And then dinosaur discoveries of soft tissue and the history of this. And then we're going to end with the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. And I've seen some amazing things. I've been studying this creation stuff for almost 20 years, and I've been speaking for almost 10 or over 10. And I look at the butterfly, just amazing. It goes from a caterpillar that's got no reproductive organs, and then it goes into the chrysalis and just dissolves itself and puts itself back together and flies away as a butterfly. And so these monarchs that we see now, they're flying all the way back to Mexico, and they've never been there. They're 3 or 4 generations away, their mom and so they're going back down there. It's like the golden plover, they're Alaska birds in Alaska, they fly to Hawaii. How they can find it. And they have to fly in formation, because if they don't fly in formation, they won't make it. And the parents leave before the kids do. So I'm just amazed and stuff. And even like the Fibonacci sequence, or the golden mean ratio, this bone plus this bone equals this bone. And this bone plus this bone equals this bone. And you see that pattern repeated throughout nature. The same swirl in a hurricane is the same swirl in a galaxy, same swirl in the DNA, and the same swirl in the horns of certain animals and shells and sunflower seeds. And so there's a lot of stuff that amazes me. But this last one, I've never heard of it. My wife found it last month, and I'm I'm bewildered. I've never heard of it before, and I'm just amazed that God designed this ability. And so you would have enjoyed that on your way down the mountain, so that's a little bit. But the update is there's a battle going on, creation versus evolution. And last May I gave this talk here in April, Prepare for the Battle. We told you what powerful evolutionists have planned for humanity. And YouTube likes to censor those, so everybody can take one of my cards. These are my creation talks on YouTube. And if you want to hear the politically incorrect talks, it's on Rumble. Just email me and I'll send you the channel. It's education, not indoctrination. But I spoke in Nebraska at their creation conference. Yeah, that was pretty fun. I was interviewed on a Denver radio station, RSR, Real Science Radio, and it's broadcast on a Denver radio station. It's called The Great Reset and Hackable Animals. And so, yeah, it's a battle. I mean, this is motivating what they have planned for humanity. And it's I don't want to say frightening it, because we're supposed to fear not. This is motivating. I'm trying to share this message wherever I can, and I've given it 3 or 4 times at churches in Wisconsin and Minnesota over the summer, and I'll be doing this later. I'll get into that. Oh, and one of the guys listened to that interview and emailed the host, and he said he's binge watching the Solidify Your Faith videos. I can't stop. They're great, is what he said. And my friend John, he was here a few months ago, and he did the same thing. He started watching my talks, and he couldn't stop, and he couldn't sleep that night. So we watched them all night, and it happened to me even. It's like, I gave the talk. I know what's in it. And I started watching. I watched 2 of them one night. And so, so whatever. And then in the summer, I was helped with our vacation Bible school. Good day, mates, and welcome to Australia. We taught them 3 questions. Where'd that come from? How do you know that? And how'd life begin? You can ask those questions to evolutionists, and they have a real hard time. They can't answer how life began. So you can ask something to the most brilliant evolutionist in the world, and you'll stump them. Where'd matter come from? How did life begin? And then I was actually in the University of Illinois, Chicago students are here, and I gave them a couple of talks, 2 Fridays. One was, who am I? What am I? What am I worth? Where am I going? Why am I here? And if you're an evolutionist or an atheist or a creationist, you're going to have 2 totally different sets of answers for that. And then I gave a Hydroplate Theory talk. That one was very interesting. I'll be doing that next month. And in the summer, anybody ever been to Living Water Bible Camp down by Westby. This is just a piece of it. It's just the really neat. They made those covered wagons, and this is where it is. It's just the neatest setting. And their motto is explore, discover, wonder, worship. You know, when we explore, we'll discover, and then we'll wonder about it. It's like, how does that butterfly put itself together? Because that can't happen by step-by-step, chance, random mutations. And then you end up worshiping the creator of the butterfly. And just, again, a neat setting. And I was there for a Wisconsin creation adventure. And so this was actually a berm at one time holding back a lake, and there was a big flood, and it washed it all away. And so the water can do a lot of damage in a small amount of time. So I was there for a couple of 2 or 3 days listening to PhD scientists and real famous, really good at creationists. And then we took a road trip to Baraboo and took a look at, it's one of the most unique places on Earth. You see, to the left of it, to the west, it's all these hills and really steep valleys and hills and stuff, but to the east of it, to the right, it's all pretty flat. That's because to the right, it was covered with a glacier. And they're right on the line. That shape around it, it's kind of like a circle. They call it a canoe shape. Do you see that? That green part? That's very interesting because that's where the Earth pushed up. And this is one of the rocks it pushed up. This is Van Nuys rock by Baraboo, and it's like black on one side and it's white on the other side. Like, so how did that happen over millions of years? And then you look at some of these rocks and they have ripples in them. That was the bottom of a river or bottom of a lake at one time. And then what's very fascinating is they're vertical, some of them. You can't see it real well, but do you see those ripples on that rock? That rock is vertical. There was enough force to push a lake bed straight up and down. How in the world does that happen? And then you can see a little bit better right here. It was just a really, really neat trip. My favorite part was this Parphrase Glen. You walk through this stuff, I mean, it just got gouged out real fast. Notice that bottom layer, that's quartzite, and then that top layer, there's a bunch of rocks and mud flow on top of it. And it's, how does that happen? It was a big flood. And there was a stream there. It was so much fun walking in the stream. I don't know if you ever did the stick thing in a current when you were a kid. It just is for a mile doing that. It's a lot of fun. And so, yeah, you get these boulders up there, and it was a mud flow that stopped rapidly. Otherwise, all the sand would have washed away. So as something that happened rapidly, and there's the great unconformity. This is at Devil's Lake State Park. And down on the bottom, that's that quartzite. You can see that same layer of quartzite at the bottom of Grand Canyon. And then you see this layer of sedimentary rock on top of it. And so something happened in the past. And I had a booth at the fair, and I was trying to get people to realize what was going on. And Ox from Ox in the Afternoon KNSI, he interviewed me. I gave this talk up, What's Wrong with Our Textbooks, up in Ashland, Wisconsin. And a lot of these talks show up on my YouTube channel, so if you're interested. And then a California club had me give this hydroplate theory talk in September, and that's a really neat theory. I mean, I don't know, has anybody ever heard of the hydroplate? Oh my, that colored in the details for me. It just, you know, Kent Hovind, I saw his Age of the Earth, and that connected the dots. The Bible's true, and the evolutionists are lying, and it's based on lies. And then I listened to Walt Brown Week on rsr.org, Real Science Radio, and that just colored in all the details. You know, it answers 25 major features on Earth and in the solar system. Plus, he makes accurate predictions that are astounding, like what's in a comet, why are there rounded boulders. So that's a good one. And I'm trying to get Walt the credit he deserves. You know, it's been swept under the rug, so you can check that out. I'm going to be, next month, I'll be giving that Prepare for the Battle talk at that same creation out in California. And Sioux Falls invited me, South Dakota Health Freedom, they invited me to give a talk at their Hold Summit, Health, Ownership, and Liberty Development. And so that's kind of what's happening. We'll move on to current events. Has anybody heard of that Webb telescope? Anybody heard of that? Oh my. Yeah, let's take a look at this. This is the James Webb Space Telescope. Took them $10 billion to get it up there. They're looking even farther than that Hubble Deep Field image. They're looking way back in time. They think they're going to see the origins of the universe because they're looking so back in time. But what does it say? The JWST's first glimpse of early galaxies could break cosmology. So it just doesn't fit. And this I heard on Real Science Radio. video. They go through it every week. Yeah, go into rsr.org. If you don't get anything out of the talk, just get that website, and you'll be able to learn everything. Keep up to date. And then it says, the James Webb Space Telescope's first images of the distant universe shocked astronomers. Is the discovery of unimaginary distant galaxies a mirage or a revolution? So they're having a hard time with this, and everyone was freaking out, is what it says in the article. How can they explain these old universes? In the weeks and months following its findings of surprising mature early galaxies, blindsided theorists and observers alike have been scrambling to explain them. They were blindsided, but we weren't. God. Bob Enyart, when the Hubble Deep Field image came out, he predicted you're going to find mature galaxies, and they said, no, you're crazy. And guess what? The Bible-thumping radio host was right, and the PhD scientists were wrong. And that happens over and over again. At stake is nothing less than our very understanding of how the orderly universe we know emerged from primordial chaos. So they can't explain it. Again, $10 billion. Maybe there's something happening in the early universe that means it's easier for some of the galaxies to form stars. Yeah, I would say there is. It's in the Bible. He made the stars also. Yeah, it's a lot easier than their confusing theory. And then going to RSR also, and if you want to hear all the shocked evolutions, they have these lists of problems with the Grand Canyon, list of not so old things, and list of shocked evolutionists. I'll go to St. Cloud State and I'll play this on my Bluetooth speaker. I'll play Real Science Radio. That's what I did when I was preparing for this talk. I listened to Mark Armitage being interviewed on RSR, and I figured, well, I'll go over to St. Cloud State and let them hear it too. And I was playing it, and a professor walks by, and what did I say to him? He was just walking by, and I said, dinosaur soft tissue, can't last millions of years, but they find it everywhere. That's about all I said I had time for as he's walking by. And he goes and he sits down on a bench, which is an earshot of this thing, and he sits there and listens for about 15 minutes. And as in that time, they talk about the chirality of amino acids and proteins. There's two types. They're mirror images of each other, like our hands. They'll say left-handed or right-handed. And if you're alive, they're all right-handed, 100%. And after you die, then it levels off to a 50-50 mix. And as the guy is sitting there, Bob's talking about a study how they did that to dinosaur eggs, and it was mainly left-handed. They can't be millions of years. That's another way of testing it. And the dinosaur discoveries. We wanted Mark Armitage to speak at our Creation Science Association that meets every month at Northwestern, besides December. And it's the third Tuesday of every month. I encourage people to go. And we wanted Mark to speak. And he said, well, I'll speak for nothing if you can get some labs for homeschoolers. And so we set up some labs. He wanted 3 labs so he could teach 60 kids and let them see the dinosaur tissue, the dinosaur nerves and stuff. And we actually had 5 labs. We had over 100 kids, or 100 kids and volunteers that went through a lab like this. And one of them was a biology major, Don Slinger. He said, this is the best college lab I've ever had. And he's had a lot of labs. And he got the kids up to speed, and we sat through the same training, so we knew how to use the microscopes, and we could help the kids learn how to use the microscopes. And it was just astounding what we could see. Okay, but before we get to the discoveries, let's lay the history. They found dinosaur soft tissue in the 60s, but it was all just kind of swept under the rug. Nobody knew what to do with it. And then this is dated, April 2006, Schweitzer's dangerous discovery. When this shy paleontologist found soft, fresh-looking tissue inside a T-Rex femur, she erased a line between the past and the present. Then all blank broke loose. That's right, she found it. And let's take a look at what it says in this thing. And it's dangerous discovery. What's dangerous about finding soft tissue in a dino bone? Nothing's dangerous about that. The only thing it's dangerous to is people who get their funding and their prestige and their power from evolution being true. That's who it's dangerous to. Their power, their prestige, their money. It's dangerous for them, but not for us. And we're going to listen to see how far they'll go to protect their prestige. Okay, but in that article, she said it smelled just like one of the cadavers we had in the lab who we treated with chemotherapy before it died. So these bones smell. And Jack Horner, that's Mary's boss, says, yeah, all Hell Creek bones smell. And that's where Mark found his bone too. And the guy says, do you realize you've got red blood cells in that bone? And Schweitzer remembers my colleagues brought it back and showed me, and I just got goosebumps because everyone knows these things can't last for 65 million years. Everyone knows that, okay? They can't last 65 million years. And when Schweitzer showed Horner the slide and recalls Jack said, "Prove to me they're not red blood cells," why would he want to do that? Yeah. But he said, yeah, that seemed impossible. Okay, everyone knows how soft tissues degrade. She said, and if you take blood samples and you stick it on a shelf, you have nothing recognizable in about a week. So why would there be anything left in dinosaurs? Why would that be? And they found transparent blood vessels, and she says, oh, this isn't happening. And sure enough, the vessels were all over the place, so it goes way against their old age theory. Through the microscope, she could see what looked like perfectly formed osteocytes. Those are bone cells. And the past was roaring to life. That's right. The past, she erased that line. The millions of years is gone based on this, what they're finding. And then this one, this is out of Nova. He says, most experts thought that such structures would have decayed and vanished long ago, but Schweitzer has found evidence of delicate structures such as blood vessels and red blood cells. Okay, those are facts, all right? She found the blood cells and vessels, and that have survived for millions of years. Now that's interpretation, that's not a fact. That's the interpretation they're putting on the bones. So when you're reading science books or journals, you have to separate the facts from the interpretation. Facts are observable, testable, repeatable. Millions of years is none of that. Evolution is none of that. And we go into that in other talks. And this one's from creation.com. It was totally shocking. She said, I didn't believe it until we had done it 17 times. 17 times. It's like, man, these are real. No, they can't be. Do it again. 17 times and again and again and again. It's, oh, wow. And then she said that to Jack. She said it was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. That's what Mark Armitage said. He said 90% of those bones they take out of that formation are not fossilized. She says it's real odd, unusual to find a fossilized bone. So they're just regular bones. And you can go on, if you want to go on a dino dig, he's going out in April or May. Go into his website, Dinosaur Soft Tissue Research Institute.com or .org. It's DSTRI, and we'll show you that in a bit. But he says, you know, they'll go and they'll push away. You have like a wall of sand right here. And you just pick at it with your knife, and then teeth and claws fall out of the hill. Yeah, so if you ever wanted to do a dino hunt, I think you would enjoy it. So it's exactly like looking at a modern bone. Of course, couldn't believe it. I said to the lab tech, the bones are, after all, 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? Well, change the date, but they won't change the date. So the Old Testament to an evolutionist is the Big Bang, and they'll change that all over the place. They'll add dark matter, dark energy, string theory, inflation to that to keep it. And the New Testament to the evolutionist is the geologic column, and that's literally set in stone. They won't change that at all. Not at all. Did you have a comment, Blaine?
Yeah, just the last two sentences on that page. What I don't see is the claimed millions of years. So we should abandon this doctrine.
Oh, really? Yeah. But it only claimed millions of years. Wow. Yeah, they'll do everything. And listen to her in her own words.
Is that amazing to find this kind of soft tissue in a fossil this old? And what can the soft tissue really tell us?
Well, it's very amazing. It's utterly shocking, actually, because it flies in the face of everything that we understand about how tissues and cells degrade. It's not something that any one of us could ever predict or hope for.
Did you catch that? Utterly shocking. Actually, because it flies in the face of everything that we understand about how tissues degrade, tissues and cells degrade. Okay? And now it's going to be another, it goes on, and they're going to say fact of 70 million years, fact of 70 million years, fact. It's not a fact. All right? And we'll just listen to what they say.
Is the fact that this stuff was fossilized as it was, of 70 million years old, you don't expect to find soft tissue, do you?
Not at all. No. It was utterly shocking.
So you have to sort of rewrite the book as far as fossilization goes, I assume.
Well, that's the exciting part for me. I've always been very intrigued by how things change in going from a living being to part of the rock record. And like I said, a lot of our science doesn't allow for this. All of the chemistry and all of the molecular breakdown experiments that we've done don't allow for this. So if this material turns out to be actual remnants of the dinosaur, then yes, I think we will have to do some certainly rethinking of some of the basics of the model of fossilization.
You know,
Well-
Mary, when I was reading about this story, I was amazed that in some of the capillaries, when you went to pull them, they snapped right back. Are you amazed at the quality of these remains?
Absolutely.
70 million years old, huh?
It's just doesn't seem possible. But yes, you can actually take the vessels, and they do have internal components, and so you can take a probe and kind of squeeze those things out into solution, and the vessels are fine. It's just, I can't explain it, to be honest.
I can't explain it. They're just shocked like crazy. And she even said, you know, they're going to have to look at the methods of fossilization, instead of just saying, hey, they're not 65 million years. But they'll do those mental gymnastics. And again, RSR, Real Science Radio, my favorite website, Bob Enyart, he called up Mary's boss, Jack Horner. And normally I just tell you what happened, but this is the actual conversation. We'll let you hear this.
Paleo.
Hello, could I speak to Jack Horner?
Yeah, who's calling?
This is Bob Enyart with KLTT Radio in Denver, Colorado. That's Bob Enyart.
Yeah, let me transfer you over to his office. I think he should be in there right now.
Yellow.
Hello, Jack. This is Bob Enyart with KLTT Radio in Denver.
Uh-huh.
How are you doing?
Good.
Jack, I sent a letter to Bob Harmon a few weeks back offering the museum a grant of $8,000 to do a carbon-14 date test of that soft tissue T-Rex you guys dug up. And he said he would forward that to you. And I'm wondering if you saw that or considered it.
Well, carbon-14 doesn't work on something that old.
I understand that, and normally we wouldn't expect to get soft tissue out of a T-Rex skeleton either, but sometimes science proceeds by crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and you guys might have other things you'd like to carbon-14 at the same time. In fact, in the last couple of weeks, I've been able to raise a little more money, so that's up to $10,000 now, that we'd be honored to give you guys if you would consider doing that test.
Well, we can't do that test.
You can't do that.
No.
Do you mean the museum doesn't have the laboratory?
We certainly don't.
Okay, well, we're happy to pay the expense of having a lab do the test in addition to the $10,000 to the museum.
Do you know how carbon-14 works?
Yeah, I'm familiar, and I realize it's useless for anything over maybe 50,000 years or so. But I've done a talk show in Denver for 15 years, and there's a group of folks interested in science. Of course, that discovery caught their attention, and they thought, well, it'd be logical to do this, to just go ahead and do it, even though nobody would be inclined to do it, just like nobody would be inclined to look for soft tissue inside of a T-Rex.
Well, yeah, and, you know, we're still trying to figure out what it is, what it's actually made of.
Right, exactly, whether it's hemoglobin or whatever.
Well, you know,
Jack, is the amount too small that it's just not worth the consideration?
no, that's not it.
Okay. What if I were able to raise more money?
No, the amount of money has nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because carbon-14 doesn't work on something like this,
Right.
your results that you get could be all over the place.
Well, they should be infinity. It should be not datable. In other words, it shouldn't come back saying it's 25,000 years old.
Right.
It should be infinity. And so that'll be a worthwhile...
Well, infinity isn't exactly what you get.
Okay.
I mean, it's like trying to date a piece of concrete.
Right. You
have to have carbon in it.
Right. You wouldn't use carbon-14. Now, the skeleton is not fossilized. Isn't that true, or largely not?
Well, it's you know, the bone is made of calcium phosphate.
Mm-hmm.
like I say, we're still trying to figure out what the actual soft tissue is.
Right. And see, we were hoping that a test like this would just add another bit of scientific information that you would have at your disposal. And also, in that grant letter, we asked if it could be a blind test with 5 different specimens, and therefore then the museum could test 4 other specimens that you might want to have carbon-14 dated, and so you could put it all in the same batch, and those testing then will pay the cost of that. That'll be free to the museum plus the $10,000 grant.
Let me tell you where I'm coming from here.
Sure.
All right. Obviously, your group is a group of creationists,
Yes.
and the spin they can get off of it,
Right.
doing it, is
Well,
not going to help us.
Yeah. So even though it's just a scientific test, they're not asking for voodoo or anything.
It's not actually a scientific test. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Carbon-14 dating something with soft tissue in it. Jack, if I could raise $20,000, would it be worth?
I will talk to Mary Schweitzer about it.
Okay. I appreciate that. And how about this? I'll resend you the grant letter with the amount of $20,000 in it. And then you could talk to Mary and we'll see where it goes.
I want to know what group is sponsoring it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I need some really specific details about.
Sure.
And don't just tell it to me straight.
Of
okay?
course. I've hosted a daily talk show for 15 years. We're on a 50,000 watt AM station, KLTT. And there's a local church here, Denver Bible Church, that's offered to help. But we also have pledges from any number of individuals in the Denver community.
Okay.
So we could, if you guys agree, we could send you the check within 24 hours.
Okay. Well, let me talk to Mary, and let me just talk to a few people.
Okay.
Because I don't want to, I can't afford to have it turn into a circus.
Right. Well, I do understand that, and I appreciate your time. So,
okay. I will see Mary this next week.
Oh, that's fabulous. I'd be happy to call you back in 2 weeks from now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Jack.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Very professional. To date, Jack Horner has not accepted Bob Enyart's offer to carbon date the T-Rex fossil. Our evolutionists running scared. You be the judge. It says very professional. This is the letter that he sent them. $20,000. Test 4 or 5 things. Blind tests. They never do blind tests. And then see what the results are. And they didn't want the $20,000 plus the $3,000 to do the test. And so, he said, remember when he said it's not going to help? My question then would be, help what? Science? Go wherever the evidence leads, or help evolution, indoctrination. But these scientists actually did carbon date 8 dinosaur specimens, and they got dates ranging, this was in the 2012 Western Pacific Geophysics meeting in Singapore. They tested 8 dinosaur specimens, and they gave dates ranging from 22,000 to 39,000. That's a far cry from 65 million. And at the symposium, you're supposed to get up there, hey guys, these are the results, this is where we found the bones, this is how we did the test, this is the labs we did. But they weren't allowed to do that. The abstract was removed from the conference website by 2 chairmen because they could not accept the findings. Unwilling to challenge the data openly, they erased the report from public view. So if you want to see this, you have to go into it's on YouTube, you can see it, decontaminated dinosaur bones, carbon-14 dated. And you can watch it online, you can watch it, you can see the results, you can see the labs. And so now they're trying to figure out how that could be preserved. And they came up with iron. A roll of iron, this is Mary Schweitzer. A roll of iron, and Bob Enyart calls her Iron Mary, or Iron Maiden, something like that, Iron Mary. A roll of iron and oxygen chemistry. Now, I was at the vocational school, and I was talking to students about this, and one went and he got this, he printed it out. Yeah, it's here, right here somewhere. But he printed it out and he gave it to me, and he said, this is how it happened, this is how it's preserved. And but what you notice, if you look at this, and I took a screenshot of their video, the materials and methods are not included. They didn't, that's very unusual for the materials and methods not to be included. So when Mark Armitage got a hold of the materials and methods, he found out that she gave the blood anticoagulant, you know, so it wouldn't clot, and that they spun it down in a centrifuge, and they used a molecular filter. They did all these things, and that's not in nature. But that's how they did the experiment. Then they did another experiment where they just dumped iron oxide in it or something like that. But it does not work, and Mark Armitage really blows it apart. This is a osteocyte. This is a bone cell. That thing sticks to your bone, then it reaches out and it connects, and and calcium gets put around it. And this is Mark Armitage's discovery. He found one of them in a Triceratops horn, and then he published it. He sent it in, wrote up a paper, sent it in. He gets a call. Well, I'll let you hear it. He'll discuss that with you. But it's the first report of sheets of soft tissue from Triceratops horns. Okay, so he's got a world first. And you can listen to this too on rsr.org, and I did, you know. And Triceratops, so he did something nobody else in the world did. You think he got a raise? You think he got another office? You think he got promoted? Anybody want to take a guess what happened to him? He got fired. That's right. That's right. You got to bow down to that sacred cow of evolution, or you're going to lose your job. Mary Schweitzer did not. She still believes in evolution. This guy's a creationist, so he lost his job. And it's happening all over the place. You can see these books on the table back there. If you want to see this, there's a documentary too called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. I'd encourage you to watch that. It's kind of deceptive. The cover looks more like a junior high comedy, but it's not. It's very well documented. He links it to the Holocaust, when people take evolution too far, but that's where it goes. And then Jerry Bergman's, he's written 3 of these. He says he could write 6. He's got 6 file cabinets full of people who sent in examples of them losing their job, losing grant money, losing their position, not getting into grad school. So you got these high priests of education. They determine who the next high priests are, and they don't let creationists in there. And that's on my other talks if you're interested in that. And even the so-called Christians are attacking Mark. This is reasons to believe. And could fresh dino soft tissue survive for millions of years? And so at the very bottom, this is why he's asking that. How to respond to maintain the old Earth perspective. That's not science. You go wherever the evidence leads, but he's asking, he wants to know. And then Hugh responds, if a sample is isolated from any exposure to bacteria and oxygen, then soft tissue evidence easily can be preserved for over 100 million years. All right? So let's listen to Mark respond to this.
Hi, this is Mark Armitage coming to you from my lab, where I've been busy working on dinosaur bones and the soft tissues within them. In fact, this is a piece of Triceratops frill that we excavated from the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, and we've been finding lots of soft tissue in this, the bone osteocytes, beautifully preserved down to hundreds of nanometers structure, and still soft. And I just have to mount a response to a silly argument that was posted by Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe on his webpage this March. Here it is now, May, and this was posted March 2015 in answer to a question, could fresh dinosaur tissue survive for millions of years? And obviously a student emailed him and said, recently I've been referred by some young Earth creationist friends to a couple of articles about a Tyrannosaurus Rex tooth and a Triceratops horn that both underwent autopsies showing fresh organic material. Now obviously the Triceratops horn is my work. That's the work that I published in Acta Histochemica, and because no one else has found soft tissue in Triceratops horn. So this is an answer that he's mounted against my work, and therefore I'm going to respond. It's interesting, though, the last statement that the student makes. He says, I would love support on how to respond to maintain the old Earth perspective. Dear student, whatever your name is, don't have an agenda for your science. Don't be afraid of where your science takes you. In my case, my science took me to soft tissue in a Triceratops horn. And I'm talking stretchy, and I'll show you this here in a second. This is what we mean by an example of soft tissue which was collected from the Triceratops horn in Montana. I'm going to stretch it. Look at how stretchy this is. And this is full of bone osteocytes, the tiny cells that make this tissue and then impregnate it with bone mineral. And this was found 1 foot from the surface in Montana in the presence of insects, microbes, rodents, plants, and fungal bodies, and we've recovered the DNA of all of those. So this cannot hang around for millions of years in the presence of all those organisms and oxygen and water. And so this is what we're talking about by soft tissue. Now, Dr. Hugh Ross, and I like to call him Dr. Huge Wrong from Reasons to Question, has an a priori or an in advance problem with Scripture. He questions most of Genesis. He questions the literal 6-day creation. He questions Adam and Eve being created at the beginning. And Jesus said that they were created at the beginning. He questions the Garden of Eden. He questions a flood, a global flood that killed everything on earth except for those people and animals that were in Noah's Ark. And so Hugh Ross, or Huge Wrong, is guilty of the first sin in the Bible, which was, did God really say? And he needs to repent of that and start believing what Scripture says and what Jesus taught and preached. But here he goes. Paleontologists who have studied these fossils disagree. Disagree on what? The claim made by young Earth creationists that discovery of soft tissue in dinosaur fossils prove that these fossils cannot be millions of years old. So he's calling what we're producing and publishing in the open scientific literature a claim, not a published peer-reviewed result, and he's saying paleontologists who have studied these fossils disagree. Well, of course they disagree, Huge Wrong. They disagree because it upsets their little millions and billions of years apple cart. And so, yes, I'm upset about this because he's attacking my work. He goes on to say, if a sample is isolated from any exposure to bacteria and oxygen, then the soft tissue evidence easily can be preserved for over 100 million years. Really, Dr. Ross? And you have experimental evidence to show that? You know, we did a blast DNA analysis of the Triceratops horn. Not the frill, but the horn. And we found the DNA of over 30 bacteria, plants, fungal bodies, and we even found insects and rodent DNA. And so the horn was obviously not isolated from oxygen or organisms. In fact, it was a foot below the Montana surface, and that was subjected to water penetration, to the freeze-thaw cycle, to who knows what else. And so your claim, Dr. Wrong, is specious because these were not cut off from bacteria and oxygen. In fact, I have photographs of plant roots and fungal hyphae traveling through the horn right next to osteocytes, which are the bone cells, the soft bone cells. And I can show you these pictures, Dr. Wrong, if you'd like to see them. Now he goes on to say that it's easy for these things to be preserved for millions and millions of years. And if you read the peer-reviewed science papers in which these discoveries were announced, you will note the authors do not express shock at these findings. And so what he's claiming here, as a paleontologist, are not shocked by soft tissue and dinosaur bones. I can tell you folks that they are shocked. This is controversial. The editor that reviewed my paper, before he published it, and he published it very quickly, by the way. It was submitted in late December, reviewed, corrected, and accepted for publication on the 3rd of January. That's fast. He called me on the phone before he sent it out for review, and he said, "This is very controversial." And I said, "Yes, it is." And he said, "Thank you very much." and he published it right away. Now, in the final paragraph here, he says, for more in-depth responses to young Earth creationist claims about soft tissue evidence in Dinosaur and the tactics certain young Earth creationists employ to distort the findings. Let me tell you something, Dr. Wrong. I didn't make any claims. I published a peer-reviewed paper in an international journal, and I have more papers in press on findings of soft tissues. These are not claims. You're welcome to email me or call me for a copy of the paper. If you're ignorant about it and you haven't read it, you should educate yourself. Now, I'm sorry, folks, that I'm so worked up about this, but this is my work. This is my work in the open technical literature, and these are findings. These are not tactics, and they're not claims. Thank you very much.
Scientist. You didn't think there'd be fireworks like that for a scientist, but yeah, he's very bold. He did publish it. 2 weeks after it was published, he got fired, like I said. He sued him for wrongful termination, and he won. But he's not teaching there, so who really won? And that's an interesting conversation, too. But yeah, he was, somebody got in his face and said, you know, you can't be teaching, you know, this isn't science, you know, what you're doing. It just was belligerent in his face. And he says, what's not scientific about soft tissue? And the guy left away in a storm, and they were, you know, he could have filed a complaint on that guy. And then other people said, you know, just let it go, it won't happen again, Well, then that guy becomes his boss and fires him. So, yeah, it's just incredible what's going on. But this is his website. It's Dinosaur Soft Tissue Research Institute, so it's dstri.org, and you can see the papers that they're talking about. They're all right there. You can go in, you can see the pictures, and this is the one that the Microscopy Today, and I talked to him about this. He's on the cover of it, but he's blackballed. He can't get you know, they don't want to give him a job. So this is what I learned last month helping with the class. And what you see is this is a soft tissue, or this is a bone right there. And you got the canals in the bone, and there's blood vessels that go through the bone, and because they make the marrow or the blood cells and stuff. So there's bone cells, there's veins and blood vessels in there, and then there's nerves too. That's what's on the cross section of your bone. Okay, so the blood's flowing around here, and then there's osteocytes, and so that's what we have. You get those canals right there, and you do a thin slice section of that. It's like half the section of your hair. And notice the canals are filled up with black stuff, and that's pyrite. It's made by iron and like some sulfuric, some other chemical that comes from breaking down stuff. But it's full of stuff. Do you see those? And if you zoom in, let's say we zoom in on maybe this one right here. If we zoom in there, we got the dark stuff and the hollow, and then there's something right there. And they're saying it's infill, pyrite infilled there. But these things are so small, you'd have to have a pressure, you know, to push them in there. And so what he does is he hits it with ultraviolet illumination. And iron will glow blue, or that it'll glow at a certain wavelength. And so what he's saying is that's iron right there. Those are blood clots. And he did this in 7 or 9 different specimens within a 2,500 mile area, and every one of them has clotted blood. And what does that indicate? Indicates they died by asphyxiation or drowning. When you drown, your blood clots. If you don't drown, it's just going to pool at the bottom. But when you're drowning, it clots. So he's showing that these dinosaurs, and he wants to dig all over the world in this layer and show how the dinosaurs all over have drowned. And this is it's in Microscopy Today. It says blood clots and vascular canals. That's what he found. And basically he's challenging them is, you guys got blood clots here, just hit it with UV light. You'll see it. we conclude that the iron in the canals is crystallized remains of blood that clotted during asphyxiation event that killed the animal. Remarkably similar stuff, da-da-da-da-da. These are also the remnants of blood clots and simply await examination under UV fluorescence. So he said, hey guys, look for yourself. Look for yourself. And he thinks that this, that circle there, that's right there, he thinks that's a blood cell, is what he thinks. And so, yeah, so that's pretty interesting. They found blood vessels. They found the osteocytes. Really neat. He's on the cover of Microscopy today doing the best work of anybody, and yet he can't get a job, or nobody will hire him. It's really a tragedy. Really a tragedy. Does anybody want to take a guess at where the nerve is here? I should have had a pointer-like thing. You know, anybody think it's this right here? Think that's the nerve, maybe? I think that's the vessel. But basically, it's right here. And so when you look at this stuff under a microscope, you find something that looks like a hair. And then we have UV, we put a UV filter on it. So when we hit it with UV light, it kind of glows. It just sticks out. And it's just screaming, zoom in on me, zoom in on me. And every time you zoom in, you just get more and more detail. And it's just amazing the detail God's got in those nerves. As you zoom in more and more, you find more and more detail. Whereas if you zoom in on a lug nut or something, you find more and more imperfections. And so that was really, it was just wow. When you'd see it, just wow. And then you zoom in and more detail, and it's just incredible what God's designed. And I emailed Mark and I said, you know, are these nerves, do they look like, I mean, is that the same nerve you'd find like in a person or a mammal or something? And Mark said, yeah. And the cells are the same size as dinosaurs. You know, it's really interesting. Okay, so, and then nobody else is finding the nerves. I mean, he's the only one looking for it. So nobody else thinks it would be there, so they're not even looking for it. And so the creationists are doing way better science than the evolutionists. We're finding all these discoveries. And like he says, it's tipping over the apple cart for millions of years. And so that was a lot of fun teaching those kids. And those kids just, wow, they were just wowed. And now he's looking for somebody to help him. You know, it's not a big organization. And he's not going to last forever. We need somebody to pick up the baton. So if you know of anybody who's got a creationist passion to him and understands biology, this work needs to continue. And it was really amazing how we figured out how to get that stuff. All right, so we're moving on. Okay, we're just about ready to wrap this up. The most amazing thing that I've ever seen, I'll let you listen to in their own words.
By 13 months of age, Daniel Kish had lost both eyes to a cancer called retinoblastoma. Instinctively, he soon began to make clicking sounds and started to echolocate just like bats do. Those clicks you hear are from his mouth, not the tapping of his cane.
Big open area, but we're approaching a structure.
He calls this flash sonar. Flash sonar has become Kish's primary means of navigation.
So in my case, it wasn't something I was really aware of. It just happened as a consequence of my childhood experiences. I get an image that occurs in a 360-degree field.
The roof structure we're under isn't totally solid somehow. It's got openings in it, as if it were slatted.
Has anybody ever heard of that? Blind people using echolocation? Has anybody ever heard of that? It's just amazing to me. It's like God designed that into us. What else has he designed into us? And yeah, you're going to enjoy this.
As a kid, I was raised to think of myself as pretty unremarkable. My parents, their emphasis, their regard for me was you're a kid like any other kid.
He got his first bicycle at the age of 6.
I learned to click like a maniac, and I learned to ride around the neighborhood. And if I ran into a pole, my parents just didn't make a big deal out of it. Running into a pole is a drag, but never being allowed to run into a pole is a disaster.
Riding a bike blind has become a kind of stunt he does to raise awareness that the brain can adapt and that people can do far more than they realize.
15 years ago, it was just unheard of.
So if you'd all close your eyes for just a moment, okay? And you're going to learn a bit of flash sonar.
Now, you have scientists studying it, you have instructors wanting to learn it, you have instructors wanting to teach it, you have blind people wanting to learn it. Being able to navigate comfortably in any environment, under any circumstances, nothing can be more fundamental to freedom than being able to do that.
But his name's Daniel Kish, and I'm just, again, bewildered why I've never heard of this. And I want to get him promoted a little bit. And I asked him, and I emailed him, it's like, what was your parents' thought process about getting you a bike? And he says, I don't think they thought about it. They just brought it home. And he figured out how to learn. He learned how to ride a bike being blind with that echolocation. And parents just thought he was, just treated him like normal. You're going to grow up, you're going to pay taxes, you're going to move out. And God had it designed, and how he figured out how to do that when he was 13 months old is just amazing to me. He lost one eye when he was 7 months and the other one when he was 13 months. And I'm wondering if anybody's ever done this in all of history. I have no idea. I've never heard of this. But it's just incredible how much God has designed into us, and I don't even think we're scratching the surface. And so with that, we've brought you down a journey. We looked at the, gave you an update, looked at a current event, showed you some dinosaurs, nerves and bones. Are there any questions?
Basically, I'm fascinated. I'm just mesmerized by the information and the fact that we have people that are trying to cover it up.
Right.
I'm going, what happened to the human mind? Why would you do that?
Right, and they've been covering it up for decades, and I knew that. And what we've lived through the last 2 years, it's in the medical field too.
Yes.
And I talk about that on my other channel. And so who was it? Frederick Douglass, I think. If you go into my YouTube or my Rumble channel, it's right at the top. And it said censoring somebody's freedom to speak is a double wrong because it violates the speaker to say it, and it violates the hearer, the listener, to hear it. And we need to hear this stuff. And typically, if you can't defeat an argument, you're just left with censorship. And that's what we've got with creation. That's what we've got with medical doctors. In California, Gavin Newsom, he just signed a law saying that if a doctor says something contrary to what the government says, they can lose their license. And so now there's no more second opinions in California. Well, it's going to start January 1st, and there's some doctors stepping up to the plate to say and to sue them, because we need, I just oppose censorship everywhere, and we need to stand up together. Tyranny, if you violate somebody's right, it's a threat everywhere, and we need to stand together. I go to St. Cloud State sometimes and I'll ask, what would you have done in Nazi Germany? A, resist, B, comply, C, turn in your neighbors, D, enforce the orders. And I talk to the students, and a lot of times they say, I'd resist. And I said, well, so you would stand up for people whose rights are being violated? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, last summer the nurses were getting their rights trampled. They were getting fired if they didn't get the shot, and they had a protest. Were you at the protest? And some of them didn't know about it, but I think we do have to stand together. What Ben Franklin say, we have to hang together or we're going to hang separately, But anyhow, that's kind of a tangent. Blaine.
Yeah, well, just kind of on what he said, I had seen this deal on Chernobyl, of course, on the nuclear.
Yeah.
So one of the guys that was at the end of the explanation was saying, every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth.
Yep.
Sooner or later, that debt will be paid.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the scientists that are knuckling under and saying, oh, yeah, we found soft tissue, but we can't figure out how it got to be 75 billion years old or
right.
billion years old.
Right.
That debt will have to be paid, but eventually the truth will come out.
Right. Yeah, because if you get rid of the creator, we don't have any God-given rights. So now the biggest authority is the government, and that's typically when Russia or communists take over a country. They don't really teach communism, they teach evolution, and you get rid of God. And so we need to, again, stand up for God. And again, if anybody wants some more of this information, just grab a card and email me, and I'll send you some of that stuff. Let's see. If you want to see some of Mark Armitage has written a couple of books, and he hands them out for free. You can see the pictures in there. And I got a couple of extra ones there. If anybody wants to take them, feel free. But they're not to sit on a shelf. They're to be passed around. And so, and then there's his Mark Armitage's. He's got a paper in here also. But again, yeah, I think it's a battle of information. We need to get informed and inform others. And the stakes are high. You know, because if we can make that foundation of evolution crumble, those powerful evolutionists, don't have as much to stand on anymore. So, any other questions?
Behind the smokescreen of preparing students for the new industrial economy, early progressives had political control in mind. America's original schools didn't just make kids memorize facts or learn skills. They taught them to think freely and arrive at wisdom. They assigned the classics, inspired love of God and country, and raised future citizens who changed the world forever. Today, after 16,000 hours of K through 12 indoctrination, our kids come out of government schools hating America. They roll their eyes at religion and disdain our history. We spend more money on education than ever, but kids can barely read and write, let alone reason with discernment. Western culture's on the ropes. Kids are bored and aimless, flailing for purpose in a system that says racial and gender identity are everything. Fascinating book about the cultural Marxism and how it influenced our education system and so on.